But we are going to focus on not only moving with our triple S, so finding our nice stack, we'll do that in a few different ways, and then opening up some of our most common areas that hinder our posture. So we're going to focus a little bit on head and neck, opening the chest in front of the shoulders, and then of course working on that neutral pelvis to help that low back area get a little bit more space and length. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the block. If you have one under the back of the skull, it's going to come behind the base of the skull. And let's just feel that chin down slightly and then lift up. So we're just going to start with a little neck mobility, lifting and lowering the chin, getting a little cervical flexion. Now try to keep the chin slightly in. You don't have to force a chin tuck, but we want the back of the neck to be long. And then turn your nose from side to side. So now we're getting some rotation through the cervical spine. And come back to center and just gently lift the head. We'll have that nearby because we're going to use it for our abs today. But let's bring the head down and then maybe feel if you can more easily get that triple S, that stretch of the back of the neck. Hands are going to come to our front ribs, feet on the mat for bridge. Establishing that neutral spine here. Let's push the feet into the ground. Hands are just slightly holding those ribs in place as we push into the feet. Use your glutes to lift the hips into a low bridge. So we're just going to stay here in our bridge. Let's check in with what feels like supporting our neutral spine. We want our pelvis to be neutral. Those two pelvic points drawing in. We want to feel long in the lower back, not that we're arching it or compressing it. So you can also feel the pubic bone try to zipper or lift up toward the belly, but really feel the glutes doing the work to hold you here, not the muscles of the lower back. Hands can leave the ribs. We're going to bring both palms up, take your right fingers and pull those left fingers back into a wrist extension stretch. And as you stretch out this wrist, let's focus on our breath. So you want to inhale and feel that expansion all the way around the rib cage. Exhaling in whatever way feels good today. Switch hands, stretch out the other hand, getting into that wrist extension. Make sure you can feel your breath move into those back ribs, or try to feel your breath move into those back ribs. Hands will come back to the front of the ribs. Take a breath in. And as you exhale, let's lower down slowly. Keep that engagement around the glutes and the pelvis to lower with control, re-landing that triple S. Now we'll grab our block or whatever we're using, and the block will come behind the head. So the block is going to come behind the skull. I like to have it the horizontal way so that I can grab around it just like I would grab around the back of my skull for our core work. So instead of elbows way out, we'll still try to get the elbows in nice and tight like we normally would. We just have a block behind our head. So start with the head and the block resting down again, just like we normally would, just we have a block there. Take a breath in. As you exhale, feel your front ribs pull down. Feel your head lean back into the block, but try to lift off the shoulder blades. Notice if that feels any different. If you feel like it's harder, we're trying to get into the habit of not lifting up with the head. Inhale to lower down. Block comes all the way down to that resting position. Exhale, feel those front ribs pull down toward the body. Feel the head lean back into the block so the head's a little heavy as we lift off the shoulder blades. This forces us to use kind of some of our upper core muscles instead of using the neck to lift. Inhale and lower down. Let's add on from here. Exhale, feel your head lean back into the block as you lift up. Keep the head feeling heavy, back of the neck long. Now keep feeling the belly slightly pulled down as you pick up the left foot. Hold that pelvic bowl the same, so no arching or lifting in the low back. Slowly step that left foot down. Inhale and lower. Exhale, lift up off the shoulder blades. Keep leaning the skull back into the block. Hold the pelvis the same as you pick up the right foot, knee over the hip flexion. Slowly step it down. Inhale and lower. We're going to add on one more time. Exhale, lift up. Keep the head out of it by really feeling the head lean back into the block. Pick up the left foot, hold the pelvic bowl still. You can stay here or you can lift the right heel, but keep the ball of the right foot and the right toes on the ground. Lower the heel, lower the left foot. Inhale and lower down. Last side, exhale, lift up, leaning the head back into the block as you lift off the shoulder blades. Draw the pelvic points in, pick up the right foot, hip flexion. Nothing changes in the low back. Maybe we lift the left heel. Keep pushing into the ball of the left foot, feeling the belly slightly pull down. Lower the heel, lower the right foot. Let's inhale and lower down. Let's remove that and we'll come all the way up into a quadruped. Focusing a little bit on that open chest and the shoulder blades as part of that triple S of our posture, that second S, the scapula. So slide those knees in nice and tight under the hips so that we're not too far back, causing the back to arch. So nice and tight, just like we practiced. We don't have the block there, but imagine lifting the back of the skull up without lifting your chin forward. So back of the neck stays really long. We're imagining a broom behind us, touching the back of our skull, shoulder blades, and sacrum. Hold the head and the pelvis still. Let's try to soften the chest down toward the ground without bending the elbows. So our shoulder blades are retracting a little bit, drawing in. Now push the ground away, spread those shoulder blades apart. We're getting more space between the shoulder blades. Protraction. So let's keep going. Lower the chest. We'll move back and forth between those. Elbows stay straight. Retraction. Protraction, spread away. So keep going at your own pace, get as much movement as you can. So our shoulder blades are just sliding away from each other in the spine and then sliding back in. It kind of looks like a cat-cow, but the whole spine isn't moving, just the shoulder blades. So elbows are trying to stay straight, don't let them bend. Good, now let's find neutral somewhere in the middle between drawing those shoulder blades in and spreading them away. We want to feel those shoulder blades resting on the back of the rib cage, not sliding away. And let's tuck the toes and see if we can hover the knees without spreading those shoulder blades apart. So working on that neutral scapula. We don't want to feel like we're puffing up in the upper back. And then carefully lower the knees back down. Let's do that again. Imagine that broom behind you. Feel that neutral scapula not sliding away from the spine. Hover the knees and keep those shoulder blades in that neutral position. So we're just hovering in our quadruped, really working those deep core muscles. Try not to round the back or drop the head. And then lower down. All right, let's either take a child's pose or a puppy pose. You could be on forearms and you could keep the hips higher. You can shift the hips all the way back into some kind of child's pose. Maybe rolling their wrists or giving them a little bit of a break or a little bit of attention or nourishment. Checking in with that 360 breath. All right, let's bring it forward for quadruped again. Anything that feels good with the hands as we cat-cow. You can always turn the fingers out if it feels good to stretch the wrist. You could come onto fist. You could come all the way onto the backs of the hands. Your choice. Let this cat-cow feel good as we start to mobilize the spine. Heading to down dog. Let's tuck the toes. Imagine that broom behind you here as you lift the hip creases up. So we're going to keep everything really active and lifted. The chest isn't sinking down. The shoulders aren't sinking. We're really feeling our hip creases, right where the thigh meets the hip. Lift up, up, up. We're feeling the ribs lift up and in toward the body. You're welcome to pedal the feet out if that feels nice. Keep pressing into the fingers, the knuckles, the fingertips. Big bend in your knees. Keep those hips lifted as you walk the hands back toward the feet. Happy squat. Pausing here. Let's rise up with our long spine. So now let's focus instead of the head a little bit more on the chest and the front of the shoulders part of our posture. Grab that block. It's going to come behind you. You could hold a book. You could hold pretty much anything here. It doesn't have to be a block, but we're just going to have it around our lower back. And start by feeling the head of the arm bones draw back without popping those ribs forward or arching the back. So we want to be able to feel the shoulders draw back, opening the chest, but keep the ribs in. Knees can stay as soft as you need. And let's just march. Pick up one foot at a time, holding our triple S. So as we're balancing here, picturing that broom behind us, it does not matter how far our leg lifts. Our goal here is to hold the pelvis in that neutral or upright position and hold the spine in neutral as we walk forward. So you can really feel that the low back stays long and we're moving from the hips, not the back. Let's remove the block when we get to the front and we'll start our sun salutation. So knees stay soft, arms reach forward and up. Lift those shoulder blades way up. Now hinge as if you had that broom behind you. Notice if your head tends to drop first, so nice and slow. Right foot steps back. Let's lower the knee and the top of the foot, lifting up into our 90-90. And let's check in. Ears over the shoulders, shoulders over the ribs, ribs over the pelvis. Our neutral posture. Right glute's got a little squeeze or firmness to it. And let's start by rolling the shoulders back. Noticing right away if you're holding any tension around the shoulders or the chest, maybe in the neck. And just allowing a little bit of movement into the area. Good, hands come down. Quadruped. Couple times we'll protract and retract the shoulder blades, spreading apart and then drawing in. Find neutral. Lift the front of the throat. Let's hover the knees without spreading those shoulder blades apart. Instead of lowering the knees down, we're going to lift the hips into down dog. Keep lifting the ribs long through the spine. Pelvis is neutral. We're not overarching the low back. Let's exhale and lower the knees back into quadruped. Right foot steps forward. Left knee stays down. We untuck the toes. Let's lift up. We're in our 90-90. Picture that broom behind you here. Our neutral spine, neutral pelvis. Left glute's got a little firmness to it as we roll the shoulders back. Let this feel good, rolling one back at a time. Keep those two pelvic points drawing in. Hands come forward or to your block. Left foot steps forward to meet the right. Bend knee forward fold. Push the ground away. Let's rise up. Lift the shoulder blades. Soft in the knees or very bent as we hinge forward. Imagining that broom behind us. Left foot steps back. Lower the knee, but not the toes. Let's lift up into our 90-90. And this time we will grab the block again. It's going to come behind the back of the skull. Let's feel the skull move back. So again, we're not doing chin up. We're trying to get our whole skull back over the shoulders, keeping those ribs in. And just feel as you do that, any extra engagement anywhere, maybe somewhere around the neck, holding that alignment. Hands come down, remove the block, quadruped, protract and retract. Try to keep the head and the lower back out of it. Just focus on the shoulder blades. Find your neutral position, that happy medium. Hover the knees without spreading the shoulder blades apart or rounding the upper back. Continue to lift up, down dog. Take a big breath in, pressing into the fingers, the finger pads. Exhale, knees quietly lower back to quadruped. Left foot steps forward. We keep those right toes tucked. 90-90, the block comes behind the back of the skull. Let's use it for feedback to find that neutral neck. So we want to try to get ears over the shoulders. Move the skull back like you're pushing your head back into the block. Firm that right glute like you're trying to push that right pelvic point forward. Keep the ribs from popping forward. Hands come down or to a block. Right foot steps forward to meet the left. Bent knee forward fold. Let's push the ground away, rise up. Good, our sequence hinging at the hips. Hands come down or to your block. Right foot steps back. Lower the knee, but not the toes. Let's take that block again to the low back like we did when we walked forward. So right around the sacrum, feel the front of the shoulders draw back without popping the ribs. Now we're going to add a little extra here, activating this right glute. I want you to try to pull the block apart or whatever you're holding. So it's a little active isometric stretch here as we try to pull the block apart. We're getting a stretch at the front of the shoulders, the tissues at the front of the chest. Good, let's lift up into a low lunge. So we'll lift off this right knee, turn to the side of the mat, block behind the base of the skull again. Align the neck over the shoulders and let's side lunge. Any pace that feels good. You could take it a little slower. You can make it a little bit more dynamic. Your choice, but really practice that lift of the front of the throat up into the block. And again, notice any extra engagement, maybe even in the core, to hold the head in that position. Returning to the back of the mat, quadruped. Block will come to the sacrum, balancing it there at the back of the pelvis. Right leg extends back for three-legged quadruped. Make sure your left knee is in enough and close to the hands. Picture that broom as we float the right toes off. Now keep your triple S as much as you can and start to flex the right hip. Pull it forward. And then extend it back without changing the spine. So again, we're practicing that pelvic stability, moving through the hip and not through the spine or the low back. Couple more. Draw those pelvic points in. Right knee's gonna come down. Quadruped, you can move the block. Now right hand and right knee down, modified side plank. Left foot steps back. Let's align here. Shoulder over the wrist. Ears over the shoulders. Keep those ribs in. Anything you want to do with this left hand, you can have it on the body for support, maybe the ribs, maybe the skull, wherever you need a little bit more of that brain-body connection. You could also have the left foot off the ground. We're all going to float that left foot up and transition all the way back to the front of the mat. So to get there, our left foot will step forward toward the back of the mat. We're going to lift up, keep turning to the right, all the way back to the front. Good. Step the feet together. We're going to do some hip flexion marches. Block behind the skull here. Let's keep ears over the shoulders. Just like we walked it forward marching, we're just going to hold it here at the front of the mat and do some of those alternating hip flexion marches. Keep that feeling of the back of the skull leaning into the block, not that the chin is lifting up, but that the whole head is aligning back over the shoulders. Good, let's step the feet down, put the block down, and we'll do that on the second side. Soft or very bent in the knees, ears over the shoulders. Let's reach the arms up. Hinge slowly without losing the alignment of the neck. So notice that the neck really likes to drop down first. Left foot steps back, lower the knee, not the toes. We're in our 90-90 with the toes tucked. Grab your block, place it to the lower back, back of the pelvis, and feel head of the arm bones tries to draw back, but that doesn't cause the ribs to pop. So nothing is changing here around the pelvis. And let's add that pull apart of the block. So as you try to rip or pull that block in two, you should hopefully start to feel a little bit more engagement, maybe even stretchy kind of sensation around the shoulders and the front of the chest as we get that active chest opening. We're going to lift and turn left for side lunges. So get there however you want, lifting off that left knee, block behind the head. Align the skull, feel the back of the skull, lean back over the shoulders as you side lunge. Now you can be as high up or as vertical as you want or need to be to keep that feeling of your triple S, so that broom behind your back, staying with that feeling of really moving in the hips, not moving in the pelvis or the lower back. We're going to turn to the back of the mat for quadruped. The block will come to our sacrum once we set up. Shoulders over the wrists, knees in nice and tight. This time our left leg back. And we'll try to keep that feeling of a broom behind our back as we float the left toes. Pull the thigh in, hip flexion. Extend it out, hip extension. Holding the pelvis steady. So this is such a great movement to work on that neutral posture, learning how to move the hip, but not move the low back. Keeping the core integrated, lifting the front of the throat, Now left knee will land and we'll stay on the left hand, left knee, right foot steps back, modified side plank. Left shoulder over the wrist. Now let's picture almost like we're zippering up, like we're wearing a wetsuit. Zipper up from the pubic bone all the way up to the ribs. Right hand wherever you want. Maybe we float right leg up. Your choice wherever you can feel that neutral posture, that neutral pelvis, open chest. Here's that transition. We'll float the right leg up, step it forward toward the back of the mat. Lifting off the left knee, continue to lift, turn left all the way back to the front. Front of the mat, block behind the skull. Let's add that hip flexion march. Any pace, slow it down if you want, but we're feeling that the pelvis isn't doing the moving, the back isn't doing the moving. It's just one hip at a time, and we're really trying to keep that alignment of the head over the shoulders. Good. Remove the block. And we'll do one round of sun salutation A. Soften the knees and let's reach the arms up. Get those shoulder blades and armpits way up toward the ears. Hinge at the hips without dropping the head. So keep that feeling of the block behind the skull. We'll step it back into a plank. You can immediately lower the knees or hold the knees up. Your choice. Feel that length in the spine, that broom behind your back. Let's lower the knees and pause. Lift the front of the throat up, ears in line with the shoulders. Soften the chest down slightly to draw those shoulder blades in a little bit. And from that position, we'll try to lower down as slowly as we can, keeping the tops of the shoulders lifted, getting that open chest and keeping it there as we drag the hands back for cobra. Active in the low belly, around the pelvis and the glutes. Tuck the toes, lift up for down dog, or feel free to take it back into a child's pose or puppy pose. Wherever you'd like to be. We'll take a few breaths there. Let's walk it forward. Bent knee, forward folds. Press the ground away and let's rise up. All right, hands come down. We are going to do our little stream or our second sequence where we have options to amp it up. We will be adding a couple extra movements at the end, but as for the add-ons, they are optional. You can stick to the more foundational things we just did, or you can amp it up if you want. So let's find our plumb line before we go and do the stream. Knees are going to be soft. You're going to take your fingers to your ears. Draw your elbows back and think just like we did here of drawing the head of your arm bones back without popping the ribs. So you really want to keep the ribs in. And from there, slowly lower your arms and notice what that feels or looks like if you've got a mirror nearby in terms of the shoulders, the openness in the chest. Maybe not this feeling, so it might feel a little dramatic, but that's a nice thing to do to just check that stack. So with that feeling of our neutral spine, our open chest, let's reach up, lift the armpits up, hinge, keeping that length in the spine, long in the low back. Right foot steps back, lower the knee, but not the toes. So toes stay tucked. Let's lift up. The block is going to come behind our head, a little different this time. Just like we've been doing, have the whole skull move back. You can have the elbows as wide or in as you'd like, as long as that doesn't change what happens in terms of the ribs. So active in that right glute, let's exhale, turn the ribs maybe an inch or so to the left. Keep your head leaning back into the block and then bring it back. So it might be so small. We'll exhale, rotate to the left. So we're just gonna go toward that front leg. Stay really active in the right glute. And what you might notice is that your head is really wanting to be the driver of this. So feel that the back of your skull is really leaning back into the block and feel that the ribs are what's turning you and the spine is just staying neutral and rotating along with it, but the neck is not turning you. All right, side lunges, let's lift up, turn to the right. We're gonna side lunge. You're gonna do whatever feels good. Use the block in any way. Don't use the block at all. You can have it behind the sacrum for that active chest opening. You can have it behind the skull. You can have it at the front ribs if you know you like to arch and pop those ribs. So whatever you want to do that. Turning to the back of the mat for that three-legged quadruped. We don't need to use the block this time. Shoulders over your wrist. Right leg back. Lift the front body up. Float the right toes. Now we're going to transition from here, keeping our triple S as intact as we can. Slide the right knee in toward the right hand, modified side plank. Left foot steps back. Any option here. You could be up, you could be grounded. Back to that three-legged quadruped in as many steps as you need. Left knee slides in, right leg back. You could keep toes grounded or up. Good, slide it in, modified side plank. Right knee slides in, left foot back, whatever option you want to take. So we're gonna flow or kind of just oscillate between the two. Your goal is to do this with as much, I guess you could say, grace is what comes from core integration and neutral posture, but however you want to think of it, I want you to do this with that neutral spine as best as you can, which means our pelvis is trying to stay neutral. We've really got to work the core. Now pause in that modified side plank when you get there. Left foot steps toward the back of the mat. We're going to lift up, keep turning right, all the way to the front of the mat. Let's add on, so instead of our march, we're going to flex the right hip. Step it down, hip hinge. Hands slide down as if you had a broom taped behind you. Rise up, now flex the left hip. Hold that neutral spine. Step it down, hip hinge. So we're keeping that feeling of a broom behind our back the whole time. One more. Long through the spine, moving from the hips, holding that pelvis still. All right, let's step it down. And we'll do that on the second side. Arms reach forward and up. Get those shoulders way up, but keep the ribs in. Hinge slowly. Don't let the head drop. Keep the back of the neck long. Keep the low back long. Left foot steps back. We'll lower the knee, not the toes. Block comes behind the back of the skull. Let's feel, not that the chin is lifting, but that the whole head is moving back into the block, long through the back of the neck. Rotate right, not letting the head be what initiates the turn, and then bring it back. Exhale, rotate right, give that left glute a little nudge forward. Any pace, but really keep the skull leaning back into the block, letting the ribs drive the rotation. All right, we're heading to our side lunges. Let's lift off that left knee, turn to the left side of the mat. You can use the block or not. You can use hands on the body. We're gonna side lunge. Any pace. Make contact with the full feet, not just the heels. So you're getting this nice length through the inner thighs, long through the spine. Let's turn to the back of the mat. We'll end up in that three-legged quadruped, left leg back. Lift the front of the throat, lift the ribs. All right, left knee slides in, pretty close to the hand, right foot steps back, modified side plank, however you want to take it. And then back, right knee comes in for quadruped, left foot back, three-legged quadruped. Left knee slides in, modified side plank. Any pace, you could go even slower. You could go a little quicker. Choose whatever feels challenging and demanding while you can keep that feeling of that broom behind you, active in the core and the glutes. Good, pause in your modified side plank. Good, back foot steps forward toward the back of the mat. We lift up, continue turning all the way to the front. Let's start with that hip flexion. Hands slide down. Lift up and flex. I suppose if you do want to use the block, you absolutely could here. Back of the skull as you hinge and flex. If you want to use the block and not the hand slide, same thing as side lunges, wherever you need it. If you tend to droop the ribs or move there like I do, I like to put the block on my ribs. You can have it at the sacrum if you know that's where your triple S or that neutral posture tends to move the most. All right, let's bring it down, little quadruped or belly roll, whatever feels good. Checking in with your breath. And we'll come onto our backs. Quick little twist here, knees bent. Let's roll over to the right side. Spine is long. You're welcome to have the head on the block here. Open that left arm up and back into that same type of rotation where the ribs are turning you. You can have that left arm very bent if that feels better for the shoulder. And let's take our right hand wherever we can reach or make some contact. You can do a little fingertip massage. You can take your fingers if you can grab the skin or get to the skin with what you're wearing and just slide your fingers out toward the shoulder. So we're just doing a little chest wall massage or mobilization here, helping with that front tightness of our rounded shoulders. And let's go ahead and switch sides. Knees bent as we roll to the other side, long through the spine. Open that right arm up and back. You can have the elbow fully bent. This can be quite a big pull on the front of the shoulder, so support yourself as needed. And then left hand, whatever feels good. Little love and nourishment for that right shoulder, right side of the chest wall. Noticing if you're holding the breath or tensing anywhere. And make your way onto your back if you want to take an extra little knee, hug, rock, happy baby, whatever you want. And you can end wherever you'd like. If you're on your back, feel free to keep the knees bent if that's more supportive for the low back or the knees. Hands can rest somewhere on your body or maybe along your sides. And let's just take a moment, maybe checking in with any differences we feel in our body. Maybe any extra feeling of length around the spine. And as you focus on that breath, inhaling all the way around the rib cage and fully exhaling it out. Just allow yourself this time and appreciate the time to pause. You can stay here as long as you'd like. Let's send one grateful thought out into the universe.